Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. You got Kara Rafferty and Jamie Michelle Kane
Hi, everybody.
with the real estate world. Let's get real. We have a very special guest today. I guess I say that every time, but I get really excited about our guests when they come on. Nishant, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, share with us what you do for work, a little bit about your background, and before we jump into today's topic.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. My name is Nishant Phadnis. I am the Vice President and General Manager of Rentals.com, which is one of many brands underneath the RentPath umbrella, which also owns and operates Rent.com and ApartmentGuide.com. Rentals.com primarily focuses on single-family rentals in the United States. I've been with the organization now for nearly 8 years in various capacities and finance and strategy, and now have taken on Rentals.com for over 2.5 years and have done some really amazing things, focusing primarily on single-family landlords and property management companies that operate single-families rentals across the United States.
That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit about, and let's just be very general. I mean, certainly we're April 9th, 2020, so we're in the middle of COVID. So, you don't need to be specific to right now, but give us a view of leading up till now. What kind of trends did you see for the rentals in the single family home market versus the multifamily? And then after that, maybe Jamie, you can jump in and give us a little understanding of in upstate New York, kind of the makeup.
Yeah. So I can provide some macro level industry kind of numbers. So in the United States, there's about 43 million rental household units spread across different inventory types. 35% of that is actually single family rentals, which is a third, which is a pretty powerful number. The other kind of third is single family and defined as, units between 2 and 4, so duplex and triplexes. And then the other third is really multifamily. And over the course of, I would argue, the past decade or so, more and more single family rental units have come on the market for a couple reasons. Primarily, you found a lot of DIY, what I call accidental landlords, who perhaps owned a house and then they decided to buy a second property, or their job relocated. And for whatever circumstances, they decided not to sell their primary home and turn it into a rental. So you saw a lot of those happen. But you also saw a lot of institutional investors come into the marketplace. Some of the big players are Invitation Homes and Progress Residential that own not just hundreds, but several thousands of rental homes across the United States. The largest owner-operator, Invitation Homes, owns and operates around 80,000 single-family rental homes across, I think, 15 different markets. And so you saw all this institutional capital come into the marketplace. You saw a lot of DIY landlords beginning to determine if there's opportunity to earn passive income through a rental home. And so over the past several decades, you saw more and more single-family rental properties come on the marketplace, and that trend continues. I think from 2015 to 2020, there was about a 10% increase in inventory in single-family rental property. So, and it's actually quite interesting because now renters have a choice on the different lifestyle opportunities that multifamily and single-family can offer. So it's given a lot of freedom to make kind of unique choices from a renter perspective.
What's also interesting is urban versus suburban. We're talking about that trend right now. You could truly be a single family home or, 2 or 4 family home renter and still have an urban lifestyle or still have a suburban lifestyle. So you don't really find that as often in both of those categories, right? Sometimes you only have to choose between one or the other, but up in upstate New York, you kind of can have both. So that's interesting. Jamie, if you just had to guess, in upstate New York and in the owners that you deal with in your circles, would you say that it's increasing the single family home buyer and mortgage holder and owner?
So it used to be that people who got into the industry would start in single family homes, and maybe they would flip a couple and they would accumulate a portfolio, and then they would move on and you maybe buy an 8 unit and then a 16 unit. The climate of New York is changing though. We've got a lot of regulation in the housing industry specific to multifamily. Last June, we had a complete revision to the landlord-tenant laws that have been on the books for the decades. So over the last 50 years, we've not seen these sweeping changes that we just got. And so that's what we just got, which overregulates a lot of the process. Plus, there's a proposal for what's called a good cause eviction, which would basically create a ceiling where you wouldn't be able to increase your rent more than 3%. That application of that law would apply to houses or 2 or more units, and that's the proposal that we see right now. That could change obviously as it amends, but I think now more than ever what we're seeing people do is rethink this process of what am I going to buy? Do I want to buy the 32 unit where I might not be able to charge rents, or do I want to buy the single family home where maybe I can have the entire house rented and charge enough rent that would cover the 8 units that I might buy otherwise? So you might actually end up making more money off the single family home in the long run than you would multi-units in the way that New York is presenting these potential laws.
So Nishant, the way you advertise a single family home and the frequency you have to do so is very different. When you came into the space specifically, how did you, what kind of stats, or how did you guys come to that strategy on how to help them succeed with advertising?
Yeah. So I've been with RentPath now for almost 8 years, and arguably more than half of that was in the multifamily space. And like advertising and marketers in multifamily, there's always someone moving out every day, right? And so you always kind of need that consistent marketing, particularly online, to always continue to fill your vacant units. Well, in single family, it's kind of one and done, right? You have an average tenant that usually lives between 24 and 36 months in that property. And once you find that ideal tenant, you don't necessarily have to advertise anymore, right? And so when I joined and kind of took rentals.com, it was clear that advertising couldn't be the only product that we offered, because what happens after they fill a unit, I have to wait 36 months before they come back, and I'm impatient. And so what I decided, and I quickly learned from speaking some DIY landlords and some property management companies that operated and ran single family homes, was that there's other opportunities to build product across the renter journey beyond just moving in, that we felt like there was tremendous amount of opportunity. And so over the course of arguably a year and a half, we went from being only an advertising solution product offering to adding applications and tenant screening, and then fundamentally rent payments online, which basically goes from finding the ideal tenant, screening that ideal tenant, and then managing that ideal tenant. And we kind of built that ecosystem within rentals.com, and it's proven to be successful because a lot of these DIY landlords and those that don't have the tools or resources in place to perhaps do online rent collection or offer credit card payments to their renters in lieu of maybe ACH or debit card. So it was kind of the evolution that went beyond just marketing for the single family landlord or owner.
Do you foresee? Oh, sorry, Kara.
You actually have landlords locally.
With COVID, we're gonna have to raise hands here.
Yeah.
With COVID-19, I'm surmising that this is going to be the case as a real estate attorney, but do you foresee, because the market's taken such a toll and the numbers are so drastic, the rates for interest rates are so good right now that maybe maybe somebody's like, oh, I can get this property at a steal, and maybe the will to buy the single family is going to be something that there's a real run on versus the bigger multifamily units that somebody's going to be a little scared to take on that responsibility, especially since we don't necessarily know what a post COVID-19 world looks like, and we don't know our staff, and we don't know how people come out of this. And it seems to me like this may be a good investment opportunity, as real estate always has been. And I try and assure my clients, guys, don't panic yet. Real estate's still the best investment you can make. Do you foresee a trend that maybe single family houses do jump back up?
Yeah, I think it depends on the scenario or the financial freedom that that investor has, right? Because you still need some cash.
Sure.
But I think there's opportunity to invest in single family homes, and it doesn't have to be full ownership. What I mean by that is there's companies like roofstock.com that basically is a marketplace for investors to buy and sell single family rental units. And that marketplace essentially allows investors to buy, sight unseen to some degree, homes that aren't perhaps in the geography that they live in, all outright, or they can actually co-invest with other investors and do macro investing in single family rental units. And so with the interest rates really low and capital has really flooded the marketplace,
Sure.
I think cash is pretty cheap, relatively speaking. But every individual investor is different, right? Sometimes people are weary because perhaps some of the other investments are taking a hit given where the market is sitting right now. And so, but I do agree, Jamie, that, real estate is a sound investment. And I think we learned a ton back in 2006 and 2007 and 8 on the fundamentals of real estate. And I think we've course corrected pretty well. And I truly believe that there is boundless opportunity, but it does require patience and a long-term view.
Right. Agreed. Sorry, Carrie, your turn.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that we have one landlord that we work with on a local volunteer organization. She actually opens up bank accounts for her tenants and gives them deposit slips because they just don't have the ability to pay ACH or any other way. And I feel like she's probably not she's probably very similar to a lot of the people that you're trying to serve. And, they're set in their ways. They have a way that they do things. And I'm sure it's hard to convince them, right? But it's an easier process for them, and the residents and the tenants dictate that they want this. So how do you go about making it easy for them? Because again, I don't want to come across as being so assumptive, but I do feel like these DIY landlords have made it on their own. They know what's best for them. So how do you make it easy for them to actually try something new? Using the application, payment, screening.
I think it's important to know kind of the makeup of a landlord, and particularly in single family homes. So 54% of all single family renter owners own one property. So the majority of most rental property owners only own one property. I don't think they don't consider themselves businesses. They don't lean on Jamie and her expertise to make sure they stay out of jail, right? Or don't do anything illegal. Because they just don't think of themselves as a business. They frankly don't have much operating cost, right? Their whole scheme is, hey, I'm just going to keep this, rent it out. Maybe the rent will cover my mortgage, and then I'll sell it in 20 years for a profit, right? And then when I think about when you think about those owners that own between 2 and 10 properties, that makes up 34%. So arguably, if you take those that own 1 to 10 units, that makes up 84% of all owners. And it's interesting. So I fundamentally believe that there's an education element to these single family renter owners that requires, I guess, some business knowledge, right? Things to consider when creating an application, what you can and cannot say on a lease or an application. New York has really strong laws around that. How do you collect rent? How do you screen tenants, and how do you appropriately accept and reject an application? These are all fundamental just elements of education that is required. And because the majority of all these owners only own one, they don't know what they don't know. And so I think leaning on folks like Jamie and her expertise is critically important. And, I'm sure Jamie doesn't charge a lot. So, but,
Housing, we all talk about. Yeah, I mean, New York, that's one of the sweeping changes we got was the entire application process in the state since June of 2019. One of the things right off the bat, which somebody who owns one building may not realize, is you cannot charge an application fee in the state of New York anymore. It can't even be called that. And if they make that mistake, they could be stepping right into it. So it's that slippery slope of, you think you know it all, you only have one. It may not be something where you think you're going to be on someone's radar, but all it takes is one tester to walk through and look at your unit or call you or email you for information. And those, as Kara knows, I call everything Jamie's ABCDEs. I want to see everything always being consistent and documenting everything, which is policy, policy, policy. So I make all my clients draft policies to be consistent, because you can't protect against that first box where somebody can sue you under HUD or, in New York State, it's the New York State Department of Human Rights. You can train people, though, to not have the intent to discriminate. And so that knowledge base and those laws and teaching them what you can do on an application, what you can ask, making sure, can you ask things like, have you been convicted of a crime? In 2016, it used to be in New York, you could say, we don't rent to criminals. And the very next day, once we got that HUD guidance that came down back in 2016, all of a sudden, I had clients getting sued the very next day because they hadn't updated their websites. So it is critical that people understand these testers are employed to do what, this game of let me catch you doing something wrong. That is their job. So they're surfing websites. They're, sending rogue emails to people that, as fake inquiries, and they're posing as people coming into your property management office or calling you if you have a single family house and you don't really have a management company, and they're asking questions, and how you answer those will determine whether or not you get yourself in trouble.
That's right. And I mean, thanks to Kara and her willingness to reach out to me. I mean, all this recent New York State laws, rentals.com is a national website. We cater to everything, federal, state. And so with this recent laws, we launched online applications back in August of last year, and we had standard pricing, we had standard offerings. It wasn't state specific because mostly states were kind of aligned. And then after speaking to Kara, and she's like, hey, by the way, there's some new laws you have to consider. And we quickly had to pivot, and we had to have asterisks now on our website to say, if you're in New York, we're going to charge you only $20 for a screening. And oh, by the way, you can't get the eviction report that you thought you could because other the 49 states could. And so we began to be, unfortunately, we honor the law as it is written, but it does cause us some complexity and some confusion from the renter side, because sometimes they don't see the fine print. They're like, hold on, I don't get it. Like, why can't I charge 30? Or, it's a whole bunch of just education, obviously, and teaching on how it works.
But it really sounds like working with a vendor, even if you have 1, 2, 3 homes all the way up to 10, is smart every time, because you have someone like yourself looking out for local and state laws, laws specifically. So what other pain points, Jamie and Nishant, I'm going to open it up to both of you. What other pain points do you hear, Nishant, during your research, Jamie, during your, legal guidance? What other pain points do you hear these single family owners, DIY landlords going through?
Go ahead, Jamie. Why don't you lead off?
So, again, in New York, even my single family owners who have owned properties for many years, some just got scared and they started selling. I think overwhelmingly what we're seeing now is a couple of things as a trend in New York. There's a shortage of maintenance workers. So there is a distinct liability if they don't have enough people to care after. And so the more units you own, the harder it is. So it's a lot easier to say to this maintenance worker, you're working on my 80 unit building and that's your job. Go here every day. And then you can kind of monitor what needs to be done in that building. But as we have our NICR president, she has buildings all over the place. Some are single family downtown in the city of Albany, and then some are up in Bolton Landing. So it's really hard, I think, when you start investing in single family homes that are sporadic, or, you know, maybe a good deal in this city and you think that's a good investment, when you start looking at the framework of how to service everything, I think that's one of the limitations I see for owning multiple units that aren't in an apartment building type setting.
Yeah, I agree. I think generally speaking, you know, when you own one property and it goes really well, you find the ideal tenant, he or she is really good, they pay rent on time, you feel inspired to buy more. And you feel inspired to be a little bit more aggressive perhaps, or maybe reach out to another geography that you're not really familiar with. But because of that, really, you got a home run, your first hit, you keep swinging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you keep swinging, we encourage it. At bats are great, but
Yep.
don't expect to always hit a home run. And that's one thing that we always try to tell our single family landlords are that, you know, we encourage investment. We encourage you to continue to diversify your kind of portfolio, whether it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, a duplex, you know, all of that is great. But keep in mind, each property has its own uniquenesses and its own unique problems. And
what I see some of my investors doing is when they find that hot spot, right? So they find this house that I bought yields this rent and it's way more than I thought would ever come. What I see my clients doing is trying to buy the street. And I think that's sometimes wise then, because you're still in the single family, but now you might own 4 on one block. And then again, back to that maintenance, back to the servicing, back to the, you know, collecting the rents, it's all right there for you. So, you know, trying to target areas, target neighborhoods, target a type of rental, whether it be in student housing, near a college, just trying to figure out what the niche you want to lie in and what's going to be the safest bet for you. You know, if you don't want high-end maintenance, maybe buy newer buildings, or you know, you want to service older people, you know, maybe then, you know, you're not going to be doing XYZ, whatever it is. It's about amenities, it's about location, it's about what your expectations are for servicing that property in general.
And one last piece I think often gets overlooked, and it's very unique based on the scenario, but if you're buying a home that has an HOA or a gated community or anything that's relatively community-based, I would call it, most homeowners tend to shy away or dislike when a home or a neighbor is a rental property.
Sure.
And so you often think, oh no, the renter could be the biggest thorn, but sometimes it can be the community. And you got to really read a lot about the community, about the HOA, maybe meet some of the neighbors, get an understanding, because you do not want your neighbors to be the biggest thorn, because they can have influence and really put pressure and then make a good renter leave because they're getting harassed by neighbors. There's all these other elements that many people don't think about. Right. And then it becomes a unintended consequence at the end when they have to either sell the property or try to resolve issues with the community.
I just had this issue happen with a client, not necessarily in a buy-sell scenario, but with an HOA, and recognizing you need to, as an incoming purchaser, that you're going to go ahead and try and rent that property, then you got to look at those bylaws. You got to see what it is that you have a maintenance responsibility, you know, knowing internally what you're responsible for, knowing externally what the HOA's responsibility is. And when the HOA fails to do something, how do you explain that to your tenant who may be demanding it get done? So, you know, those are things, it's really hard to rent those out because you lose control of some aspects of that rental.
You know, it's also interesting. I think it was Jamie who you said that people might go in and buy a whole block or a whole street. We saw this happen a lot in Syracuse the last few years. And essentially, you know, just a nice reminder, do your SWOT analysis, because those people are now looking to get rid of those homes because they overbuilt with the luxury student housing. And these luxury units are getting the same per room rate and offering different amenities. And so, you know, in student housing, it took a pivot, right? So I think doing a strong SWOT analysis still needs to be, like you said, Nishant, it might not be a home run every time, might be operationally a dream, right, Jamie? But then financially a nightmare later when you can't even rent them out. But
And Syracuse is definitely unique. I mean, go Orange, double alumni here. So, but it is a unique circumstance. It's one of the hottest student housing markets. So knowing what the competition is, definitely great point, Kara. Knowing when you're looking at an area, if you don't intend to be in that student housing yourself and provide the same amenities and bring those units up to the expectations of students who are coming from all over the country, you're not going to be able to rent that, or you're going to have to rent it at a lesser amount if you're not offering the same thing. So knowing the price point you're walking into, knowing what the expectations are for the community that think that you're going to, that you're trying to rent to, and being able to maintain the same like-kind services, that's all going to go to the evaluation of whether you hit a home run or you don't.
So Nishant, how do you keep yourself updated? Are there any resources, blogs, podcasts? Is there anything that you kind of watch and keep an eye on for someone that's in the single family industry?
Yeah, we have copywriters and editors always updating our blog. They're always kind of doing research, particularly now with the coronavirus pandemic. Every day is a new learning, kind of, whether it's what government support are we getting, to how do renters find a rental home in the world of social distancing. It's a kind of a spectrum. One of the largest and most admired associations, particularly on the single family property management side, is NARPM, which is the National Association of Residential Property Managers, and a large majority, they're their national organization. The beauty of that organization is anyone can be a member, vendors, property management companies, and they do really good job at providing educational series. They're doing a really good job every day publishing new facts around the COVID-19 scenarios to consider. They have a ton of landlords and property management companies in the state of New York, as well as in Hawaii. So they cover everything, right? That was a really good resource. I attend their national conference every year and give some words of wisdom from the marketing side to all those PMCs who are part of the association. That's one of the key sources that I tend to lean on, among other things. I mean, you can find a lot of, I looked at census data, frankly. A lot of this information I quoted is widely available, but the census data, they do some really amazing jobs on just hyper-local geographic household demographics, household characteristics. And that's kind of helps me understand where the trends are going at a macro level.
Everyone take your census. I've gotten 2 reminders. I have never, and I shouldn't even.
I already did it.
I did mine.
It was online. It was really easy. Just did it for 2 seconds.
Super easy. I'm really glad they kind of shifted to online. I remember when it was paper-based 10 years ago.
Yep.
Yes, sure. Jamie, any other questions for Nishant?
I think you covered everything I wanted to discuss. I think the only question that I foresee is, now that we're in this COVID-19 world, how much more of this process goes virtual? How much more of this process goes electronic? And do we lose this people to people thing that, we're doing right now, but we're doing it virtually? Does that change?
Yeah, it's changed. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? I don't think, so let me kind of take a step back. I don't think people are gonna stop looking for a next rental home. In fact, I think 60%, we just recently surveyed renters, 60% are still active, and the other 20 or so percent just slowed down. Yeah. They didn't stop, right? And so I think there's still a demand. I think there's still a learning. Over the past 2 to 3 weeks now, we've seen an influx of virtual tours, whereby people are now just taking, especially in the DIY single family side, they're just literally taking their cell phone and doing a virtual tour, walking around. Some of them are doing commentary. Some of them are just showing it. We saw a 200% week over week increase in the number of clicks to virtual tours on our website, which is pretty powerful. I think 3D tours with kind of the latest technology, certainly online applications, we're seeing a tremendous amount of renters apply In fact, 17% more in March than we saw in February. So a lot more renters are actually applying online. There's self-guided tour mechanisms, there's self-locks, all these, opportunities you kind of see on the Airbnb side, like short-term rentals, where you can just have a code, you go in, you live, and you leave. People are doing that just for tours. I have a fundamental belief that even if we didn't have this pandemic, eventually we would have gotten there. I think
it forced us to get there sooner. That's all.
Yeah, forced us to get there sooner. I think a lot of people, and I'm one of them, are becoming less. They're just lazier. I don't know what the right word is. I preach. I'm one of them. I love to do anything on my couch. I think it's influenced by Amazon. I think it's influenced by on-demand content that we see. I think the psyche of a lot of Americans now are just, why can't I just do it in the comfort of my phone or my couch, right? Yep. And there is an element of, okay, I do want to see it once, right, but people are buying cars on Carvana on their couch and never seeing the car, right? And if we do go to a point where we have a 7-day return policy of some sorts, right? I think we're gonna eventually get there. Now, I do believe coronavirus has accelerated that behavior. I think we're gonna get out once this is over, hopefully in the next few months. I think people are gonna become accustomed to maybe doing that, and maybe the renters are gonna begin to demand that from the landlords a little bit more. And I think now that landlords are being forced to do it, I think they're gonna be willing to accept it.
Mm-hmm. I think also, just from an overhead standpoint, I think you're going to see potentially not a need. I don't care. We talked about clubhouses and, community office space. Maybe it is that people can work more remotely. Like I have an hour and a half commute each way, and I'm thinking, hey, can I sell this where maybe I only go in once a week? You've trusted me for months now, to work from home potentially when we get through this. Can it be something where you don't need to see me every day? But I'm working, I've proven that I can do that. So I think that, and I think what I'm seeing is a lot of landlords force the issue on their tenants likewise to say, you've got to pay online. I had a client who had a UPS store where all his mail was going to that UPS store. And then he got noticed the UPS store was going to close because of COVID. And now, he's like, where do my rents go? So forcing them to use online portals, making sure, of course, they're accessible to everybody, but pushing it that way too, so that we're not actually going to see cash payments or money orders or certified checks anymore. Everything's just going to be straight done online. When
we launched RentPay on rentals.com, which basically is that it allows landlords to collect rent online for free. There's no charge to the landlord. And one of the fundamental, well, yeah, I can go into like
I've heard like $3.99 for checks. So that's
the landlord doesn't get charged, but the renter does, depending on the method that they use. But one of the fundamental theses of going into that product development was a pretty shocking stat that we heard, which was around 75% of all rent payments are still done by paper checks. Yeah. And it's mind-boggling, I guess. And so that was kind of our reason to believe that this product could be something that really revolutionizes all of the rent passing back and forth of rent payment.
And now people are afraid to touch those, right? So that's it. That's the point.
What forced the hand in Syracuse about 2 years ago was the slew of robberies. I don't know if you remember that, Jamie. So someone went around. Yeah, they were taking like gum or tape and getting them all out of the box. So I think the pandemic or that robbery, I hate to say it, but we're becoming an industry that is forced into things. We're not. And by the way, let me go back and say, I firmly don't believe you're lazy. I think it's a child under 2 years old.
I say that it's streamlining, right? You're more productive. If you can sit on your couch, do what you do
Efficiency.
It well.
I know you've got a young child in that house, and I feel like once you get a young child, you try not to leave. You try to do everything remotely. So I don't think it's laziness. I think you have kids or you have things in your life that happen that dictate it. But it's interesting how, and Jamie, maybe one day we'll have a whole podcast on all the things that multifamily was pushed into. And so how about here are 2 or 3 things that you can do now
We can do the top 10 things that have changed the multifamily world forever. We can talk about all these things
nobody wanted to do.
nobody wanted to do. And yeah, we all, I mean, just as a practitioner, and Kara's as entrenched as I am, it's these horror stories that we hear our clients tell that create the software that you guys put out, because it is that conversation of, oh my goodness, what's the solution to this? And then I hear this and it's like, oh, that's a solution. So yeah, we can give horror stories, and then we can give like how the industry's come along with the technology side to help those things. Maybe that would be a good segue.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So Nishant, I'm going to drop your information in the comments below, but if someone wanted to get in touch with you, do you want to give them a quick recap of what your rentals.com offerings are and how they can look?
Yeah, sure. So at rentals.com, we kind of cater to both renters and landlords. We primarily focus on single family rentals, although we support multifamily as well. Starting from the renter journey or landlord journey, when you have a vacant home, you can come on rentals.com. You can post your listing, no different than you're posting a listing on Craigslist. It's self-service if you have one property. If you have multiple properties, let's say you have more than 5, and you don't want to go through the arduous process of listing every single one, we have a dedicated customer service team and support team that will list it or actually tap into your software system depending on how sophisticated you are. So you can directly feed into our system with all your content and all your information about your vacant rental home. We will generate leads for you. So your vacant rental home will go on rentals.com, on rent.com, on apartmentguide.com, as well as other syndicated sites that we syndicate to. So we do that. We generate leads. Our goal is to get you a ideal tenant as quickly as possible. One way to find that ideal tenant is doing tenant screening applications. So we offer free applications and tenant screening to all our landlords. That includes a background check, credit score, credit check, and eviction. Obviously not in New York, but in other states. And then once you are able to review those reports, you can decide. And then subsequently after the move-in, we do offer kind of ancillary third-party moving services around utility setups, moving services, renters insurance, all these other smaller byproducts that we partner with third parties on. And then we do rent collection as well, kind of to close the loop there. And we offer all landlords the ability to collect rent online and have renters pay you either credit card, debit card, ACH, and all those funds get directly deposited to your bank account. So no more paper checks. So all of that kind of all encompassing within the rentals.com ecosystem.
Love it. And they would just go on rentals.com and
Yeah.
self-guided.
Self-guided, very easy. They can list a property. There's emails, phone numbers, all around the website. If you have any questions, we have a staff, although they are not in the office, they are working from home, but we have a staff ready and willing to help anyone if they have any problems or questions specific to rental properties.
We love it. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
All right. Have a good day, you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
bye guys.
Bye.